I like to think that when the reviews started coming out for Sony's 1000X Mark III headphones, the top brass at Bose were like, oh, hell no. They sent a bunch of designers and engineers into a room and said, don't come out until you've got something that can compete with these. I think that's what Bose did. I mean, everything that the Bose QC35-2 headphones were missing are here in the new Bose Active Noise Cancelling 700. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Caleb Dennison, and yes, today we are pitting the 1000X Mark III from Sony against the Bose 700. This is going to be a pretty tight battle. Let's start by looking at the cases. Both of them are going to protect the headphones just fine and carry the accessories just fine. The real difference for me is how they are to pack up and how bulky the cases are. Neither is particularly bulky. I do sometimes have a little trouble packing up the Sonys. For some reason, I just get it wrong sometimes. Anyway, inside the case, you get a headphone cable and the old travel adapter, which I don't know that anybody's using those anymore. I noticed that's not included in the Bose case, but I like the way these very simply fold in. It's real simple to just lay them in there. Also, there's this really slick little magnetic compartment that will hold your headphone cable and your USB-C charging cable. That's right, one of the big evolutions for the Bose 700 is that they do charge with USB-C. That means a few different things. One, with about 15 minutes of charging, you can get about 2.5 hours of playtime out of the headphones. And the battery maxes out at about 20 hours total playtime. And of course, that's going to vary depending on how loud you play them and how much noise canceling you're actually using. Compared to the Sony are a little bit better in the battery life department. They also will give you a generous amount of playtime off of just a 15-minute charge, but they'll also charge up to 30 hours of playtime, again, give or take. I think that practically speaking, they're more or less the same. Very rarely are you gonna need that extra 10 hours before you charge them up. But if we're talking about pure battery bliss, the Sony wins it on that one. Now let's take a look at the difference in control for these. With the Sony, you only get two physical buttons. One's for power and also for Bluetooth pairing. And then you also have one for noise canceling or ambient mode. So you can adjust whether you're hearing things from the outside or getting the full-on noise canceling. All the other controls are on the right ear cup. You swipe up and down for volume, left and right for track advance. You touch to play pause. And with the Sony, you can cup your hand over the ear cup and actually defeat noise canceling. So if you're on the plane and you want to order your cocktail, you just cover this up and you can speak to the flight attendant. And then when you're done, take your hand off. Noise canceling comes back on, starts playing your track again or your movie or whatever you're doing with them. And that is a fun feature, but it's also a little bit dorky. The Bose took a very similar approach. There's actually three buttons on the headphones. On the right ear cup, you get power, and then the other button is what calls up Google Assistant or Siri on your iPhone. The third button on the left ear cup is for cycling through the noise canceling. So it's not as granular as the app, which I'll show you in a second, but it will allow you to cycle between 0, 5, and the maximum 10 for noise canceling. They do, however, also feature swipe controls on the right ear cup, so work very similar to the Sony in that regard. Now let's talk about comfort for a second, because most folks are going to be wearing these things for hours, and you want them to be comfortable. Look, Bose has got a long history of making really comfortable headphones, and the Bose 700 don't just match up to that legacy, they exceed it. These are easily the most comfortable headphones that I've ever worn, noise canceling headphones anyway. And I think a lot of that has to do with the really light amount of clamping force. They still get a great seal, great passive noise isolation with these headphones, but it's putting almost no weight on the crown of my head. And that's key, because I know when I travel, to New York and I'm wearing these things for 6 hours at a time, that's kind of a pain point for me. Even with the Sony, which are very comfortable themselves, they're just not quite as comfortable as the Bose. So in the comfort department, the Bose went out there too. Now let's talk about apps for a second. Truth be told, you don't need an app to use the basic functions of either of these headphones. And when I got up and running with the new Bose 700 recently, I didn't bother getting the Bose Music app, not right away. Ultimately, I did download it. And I can tell you that the Bose app is a little bit more simple than the Sony app, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So once you connect to the Bose Music app, you can actually rename the headphones to whatever you want. My QC35-2s are called Thunder Flash. These are called Fathom. You can name them whatever you want. I just picked one of the suggested names. From there, you can adjust the noise canceling effectiveness in a more granular fashion from 0 to 10. There's also a lot of settings help, how you integrate with your voice assistant, for instance. And also you can manage connected devices with the app, which brings up a really important point. One of the things that the Bose 700 have over the Sony Mark IIIs is that you can connect multiple devices, which is really clutch for business types because you might want to be connected to your computer for listening to music and your phone for taking calls, or vice versa if you're going to do some video conferencing or whatever. That's always been kind of a complaint from most people about the Sony. The Bose does connect to multiple devices. But anyway, back to apps. The Sony app is much more advanced in that it allows all kinds of trickery, but the fact of the matter is I don't use it like ever. Unlike the Bose, which has no EQ settings whatsoever, you can adjust the EQ of the Sony headphones. But again, I don't because they sound great with no adjustments at all. You can also adjust the sound positioning. Again, I never use that. One thing I do use though is when I'm up in an airplane, there's this adaptive noise canceling feature that helps make sure that you're getting the best noise canceling, and it does sort of a pressure level adjustment. So if you've ever been on a plane, you feel a little bit of pressure that seems to get wonky when you turn on the noise canceling, the Sony completely eliminate that. Although I have to say the Bose do the exact same thing, but it has nothing to do with the app, it just happens. Now let's talk about phone call quality. Don't worry, I'm getting to audio quality in a second. The Bose are far and away better than the Sony in terms of phone call quality. It's as good as your phone, if not a little bit better. They do a better job of canceling out wind noise than the Sony. In fact, in a windy day, the Sony are almost unusable in that regard. So what you're getting out of the Bose is really great noise canceling from the noise around you through the microphone in the Bose so that you get exceptionally clear phone calls. That also means that in a noisy environment, like a plane or downtown, you're going to be able to integrate with your voice assistant much more easily than you would with the Sony, because it's always going to recognize exactly what you're saying. I think that's a huge bonus for business types because they're going to be using these headphones for making phone calls while they're on the go, and that is a key consideration for a headphone of this type. Now we're going to get to audio quality. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this part, especially you audio enthusiasts out there. The Sony, we've been calling them the best sounding noise canceling headphones for a couple of years now, and that's because they really are. They have a little bit of a boost in the bass. Actually, there's quite a bit of brawn down there. They get low and they're very punchy. Otherwise, they have a more or less neutral approach to sound. They're not trying to color it in any particular way. You get lots of detail in the highs, the transient response is really good, and mid-range is nice and clear. It's not stuffy or muddled in any way. With the Bose 700, interesting thing. So when I first started listening to these, my immediate impression was, wow, I think this is better than the Sony. But then I did some more listening, and this plays out same as speakers. When you first hear something and it dazzles you, you're kind of won over it with it. But once you kind of relax into the sound and you take a more careful look at the overall sound quality, you realize that with the Bose 700, they've done some serious sculpting to the sound. First of all, there's not as much brawn in the bass as the Sony, but that's not a deal killer. Not everybody needs that much bass. What does alter the sound of the headphones is that they're pushing the upper mid-range and the lower treble quite a bit. And what that comes off as is being super clear, super revealing sound. But listen a little bit more closely and you notice that brass and cymbals and really tight drum hits tend to pop a little bit too much. They're a little aggressive. Now, if you're in a plane and you're canceling out a ton of ambient plane noise, engine noise, you're gonna need a little extra clarity boost. And I think that's why Bose has gone this route with sculpting the sound. For everyday listening though, I still prefer the Sony. Overall, it's a more balanced sound. And I've never had a problem hearing the dialogue in a movie while flying on a plane with the Sony. Yes, the Bose may be a little bit more forward and a little bit more clear in that regard. Maybe they sound a little bit better on a plane, but anytime you're not on a plane or in a super noisy environment, the Sony just went out on sound quality. So now I need to make what I thought was gonna be a really tough call, which is the better headphone. But it's made easier by the fact that they're clearly targeted at two totally different kind of listeners. You've got your audio enthusiasts on one hand, and then you've got your frequent flyer and business type on the other hand. The Sony is the better all-around headphone because of its sound quality. Audio enthusiasts are definitely gonna prefer the Sony. However, when I'm traveling, I'm probably gonna put the Bose in my backpack because they're just that much better for all of the practical uses that I'm gonna need them for. They still sound great, especially on a plane. The case is a little bit better and they're more comfortable long term. So when I'm on those long flights, I'm gonna pick the Bose. For just general everyday use, I'm probably gonna pick the Sony and know that if I am traveling with them, they're gonna do great.